In this video, we'll start to look at redirection and some commands that we can do to take the output, input, or the error messages that we get from commands and send them to a different location. Here's a list of commands we'll be looking at throughout this particular chapter in the current textbook that we're using. And again, these commands are going to be used to manipulate or to view the output, the input, or the error messages that we get out of a command. Now, as we begin to sort of think about these concepts, let's first of all look at this idea of standard input, output, and error. And unfortunately, I can't get you an overly good diagram here, but let's think about this for a moment. You've been typing in commands, okay? So you've been typing in a command at a terminal. That command has, for our purposes, three different components of it. There's an input part of it. That's what we give the command to operate on. Then there's the output of it. That's the information that we want from it. And then sometimes, if the command does not work properly, or if it runs into a problem, we get an error or standard error message from it. So let's just look at that conceptually here, or from a command line standpoint for just a moment. So I'll bring up a terminal window. Okay. All right. So if I say ls/tmp, my command is ls. The input that I'm giving it is first of all coming from where? Where's the input coming from? It's coming from my keyboard because I use the keyboard to put that /tmp on the screen. A mouse is an input device, a keyboard is an input device, a stylus, if it's attached to your computer, can be an input device. These are all examples of input devices, but the standard input that I'm giving this command to work on is this /tmp directory. So I'm telling the command to operate against this /tmp directory. Hit enter, and this what it gives me here is to consider the standard output. Now if I had done this /tmpx, it says cannot access no such file or directory. That would be an error message. That would be an error message. So I've got the input for the command, I've got the output, and then if the command does not work properly or runs into a problem, I've got an error message. I don't want to delve into this too deeply at this point, but a command can produce both an output and an error at the same time. It can produce an output and an error at the same time. So for example, if I do lstmp and then lstmpx, it gives me this error message saying it can't find the tmpx directory, but then it gives me output for the /tmp directory. So it is possible to have both a standard output, which is that information we're looking for from the command, as well as some error message saying that at least some part of what we gave it to operate on is not working properly. Okay. Now let's go back to our text for just a moment here, or excuse me, our diagram. So we give the command in the computer something to operate on. That's our input, or standard input, and this is the way you'll see it abbreviated sometimes. That command can either give us standard output or standard error, or it can give us both at the same time. Okay? Now, just for the sake of our discussion here, and there's lots of architectural reasons behind this, but for now, just understand that numerically to the computer, standard input has a numerical value or number associated with it of 0. Standard output has a numerical value of 1 associated with it. Standard error messages have an output or have a numerical value of 2 assigned or associated with it. You'll see why that's important as we get to some redirection things later on in this particular unit. So we got standard input, what we put into the computer, what we give to the command to operate on. We've got standard output, which is that output that we're looking for from the command. And we've got standard error, which are those error messages generated by the command. I can have standard out or standard error, or I can have both of them from the same command that I type in, as we saw a while ago. So let's go back now and begin to look through our text just for a moment. We've talked about these concepts of standard input, output, and error briefly. Again, very important to read through your material. But now we get to this idea of redirection, redirecting the standard output. Let's break down this example command that they give to us here, and we're going to introduce a new symbol for you to use. First of all, let's just take this part. Looking at that command, that's something you've already been using. You're doing an ls-l, which is a long listing, and then you're giving it the absolute path name to this bin directory. So if I simply run that command, ls/l/user/bin, I've got my command, I've got my input coming from the keyboard, and I've got my output that is displayed to the screen. Lots of information displayed to my screen. So let's just ask the obvious question. Standard output is usually sent to what? It's sent to your screen. The other common place that you send output to when you're using a computer is to a printer to print out the document, for example, that you're typing. But let's just say that we need to generate a report here, or we need to provide this information to someone else. We can take the output, in this example we're taking the output of the command, and redirect it to a file in this case. So let's just call it lsout.txt and look at this command now. Same command, I'm doing a long listing of this user bin directory, but notice my special symbol. These are symbols that most of us probably haven't used for anything since math class, and we use the greater than and less than symbols, or what some of us probably learned as the alligator mouth symbols. Well, in this case, to the terminal, this is what's considered a redirect symbol. It's got a special meaning to the terminal window. It's telling the terminal, or in this case the bash shell, to redirect the standard output not to the screen, but in this case to this text file. So let's hit the enter key. Notice the command runs. We do not get any error messages, but we also don't see any output on the screen. But if I do an ls in my home directory, I now have this new file that I just created called lsout.txt. What is in that file? Correct. The output of the command was diverted from the screen and instead went into the file. Now I'm going to introduce another command here in the process of just showing you this, and that's the cat command or concatenate command. The cat command is very simple to use. It's got a single function really in life. The purpose of this command is to allow us to display the contents of a text file. That's all it does. It displays the contents of a text file. It lets us look at what is in the text file. We cannot edit or change the contents of the file with this command. It's only a viewing command. So if I say cat and then lsout.txt and hit the enter key, I can see what's in that text file. And notice what's in that text file. It's the output of that command. Now I'm able to scroll since I'm in this GUI terminal. I can scroll back up. If you're working in a virtual terminal window, a TTY1 or TTY2, you cannot scroll back up. And we'll show you as a part of this whole unit that we're talking about a way to overcome that if you're working in just a plain terminal. So again, taking my command, I'm doing a long listing of user bin, I'm redirecting the output to this particular text file. Redirecting the output to the text file. Now let's go back to our example. Same thing here. This is what we did, slightly different file name. Here's my command and input. Here's my redirect symbol. And this is the file that I'm redirecting it to. Now, they've introduced another viewing command called less. Very important tool to use. It works much like the cat command does, but a little better. Now, a moment ago we used the cat command to view the contents of this text file. Now we're going to use the less command to do the same thing, but the less command brings an extra feature to the table for us. So I'll say less lsout.txt and hit enter. Notice in the bottom left-hand corner we see lsout.txt, we see the file name. Now if I take my arrow keys, for example, I can now scroll down and scroll up the document. So you have to think about what you're doing as if you're opening up this file inside of a program. Just like if you double-clicked on an icon in Windows and the file opened up in Word or Notepad, same concept here, but we're seeing it open up in the terminal. So we've opened this thing up inside of the what is sometimes called the less pager, and it allows me to scroll up and down. So if you're working in a virtual terminal, again a TTY1, a TTY2, then the less command allows you to have that scroll up and scroll down functionality. Now notice where my prompt is at. It's a blinking prompt beside a colon. So I'm still in that program. To get out of it, I hit the Q key and it quits or exits the program. So now I'm back to my terminal. So the less command is extremely valuable to you, especially when dealing with very long output to the screen in a terminal window. It allows me to easily scroll up and down the file without any difficulties. Same usage as the cat command, but again allows me to scroll up and down. Now let's go down. Let's continue our discussion here of redirection and show you a little nuance to the way this thing works. Notice in this example we've got two redirect symbols. Let's go back to the terminal window and show you the behavior of the way a single versus a double redirect symbol works. We've seen this command that we entered a moment ago to redirect this long listing of the user bin directory to this text file. Well, let's do something a little different here. Let's just say ls redirect lsout.txt. Now what are we running the ls command against? We haven't told it what directory, so it's going to assume what? Correct, your present working directory, and my present working directory is my home directory. So I'll hit enter. Again, nothing shows up on the screen because we've taken the output of the ls command and told it to go to that lsout.txt. Now let's use our cat command in this case to view what's in that file. The output has changed, or excuse me, the contents of the file has changed. Now let's use the less pager. Let's scroll up and down. So notice 10file.txt is the top of my file, and the bottom of it is videos. Now what are we missing here? What we're missing is all of the previous content that we had before. So let's rerun that ls command that we did before of the user bin directory. Redirect it to that same file, hit enter, and then we'll do less lsout. Now I don't know if you see what's happening here or picked up on it yet, but when I use a redirect symbol, it overwrites everything in the file. It overwrites everything in that file. So when I use a single redirect symbol, send it to this file again, it overwrites everything that's in it. Well, what if I don't want to overwrite everything that's in that file? Let's go back, let's rerun that same command we did a while ago. We do that long listing. Actually, just to be consistent here, let's do this. Do that long listing of my home directory, and I'll put it in the lsout.txt file. Okay. So all that's in there. Now let's say I also want to send, and let's just do the root directory. I'm using two redirect symbols now, and what two redirect symbols does is append the data to the bottom of the file. So instead of erasing the contents of the file, it simply adds that output to the bottom of the file. So if I scroll down, here's my long listing of user bin, and now when I get down to this point, I begin to see the contents of the root directory here: var, user, temp, media,